From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Welcome in. It is the last Sunday of June and the first full weekend of summer, but for state lawmakers, this year's vacation from the Capitol, it started a little later than usual.
That's right, and that's because they came back to downtown Atlanta for a 5-day special session. It just wrapped on Tuesday.
All right, signing time, here we go.
And with that, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones closed things out in the Senate, ending this special session. Well, let's take a look at what happened in those 5 days. Lawmakers, they shelved redistricting for now. They passed a bill to extend the use of QR codes on ballots until 2028. The bill also mandates hand recounts for the governor and lieutenant governor races if the candidate vote totals are within 0.5% of each other. Now, state Democrats blocked Republican-backed efforts to cut property taxes. Democrats arguing that raising sales taxes to offset property tax cuts would affect low-income Georgians the most. And we'll talk about this with our politics panel. That's straight ahead.
Questions over the future of Georgia's election system were at the very heart of this special session. A law passed back in 2024. It mandated a July 1st deadline for the state to stop using QR codes to count ballots. Lawmakers have been arguing without consensus over what system should replace QR codes almost ever since. During this special session, Senate Bill 3EX extended that deadline. As part of an extended interview, we asked Republican State Senate Majority Leader Jason Vitarte about the extension and about redistricting efforts that fizzled.
Effectively, what SB 3EX did is extend out this deadline further. In some ways, some people might see that as just kicking the can down the road. From where you sit, what is out there to prevent the same kind of logjam that we saw during the regular session this year coming up again in 2 years when the next deadline is looming?
Well, I think we're going to have new leaders. We're going to have a new Secretary of State. We're going to have a new governor. We're going to have a new lieutenant governor. You got folks like, I've been in leadership for just over a year. It's a different team that's looking forward and wants to get things done. That's not trying to throw shade on anybody that, is in office now or leaving office now or anything of the sort. But when we have public meetings and appropriations and our ethics meetings, and you can't even get the Secretary of State to show up and do his job, that's a disservice to Georgians. And I think a lot of these problems could have been avoided if it wasn't for, I think, his dismissal of the legislature. So we're going to go back and make sure that this is done properly, it's done right, it's implemented. The last thing we want to see, especially as you alluded to, the July 1st deadline, we don't want these things, addressed by a judge in a random courtroom in terms of what Georgia's elections, should be. We wanted to be very sensitive to the situation where the special election to replace the late David Scott in Congressional District 13. And so I think as this commission moves forward, takes testimony, and makes those recommendations, from all sides, from all parties, from all walks of life from Georgia, I think we'll be in a really good place.
The governor asked lawmakers to consider redrawing the district maps here in Georgia, but on day one, Republican legislative leaders from the House and the Senate came out and said redistricting is not going to happen during this session. What prompted that decision?
Yeah, I think it's really two simple things. I think one, these maps we would have undertaken would not have gone into effect until 2028. And then I think secondly, post-Supreme Court cases, really just want to see what the federal courts are going to do with other states that are going through this map drawing process and this redistricting process. I think, we want to be thoughtful. We want to make sure that, we're receiving public input, especially since these maps don't go into effect for a couple more years. And so, but I think it's really important we kind of see what is the precedent of other states, let them go first, and then, we can look to the future based on some of those federal decisions and see what is appropriate.
The special session election bill, it also mandates automatic hand recounts for close elections in the governor and lieutenant governor's races. Democratic State Senate Minority Leader Harold Jones II criticized the move, but he also voted for it. We asked him about his vote and about redistricting.
You called that automatic hand recount a moment ago problematic, but you also voted in favor of SB 3EX. Why?
Absolutely, because when you know that you're dealing with people that are willing to watch the world burn, you have to make sure that you actually lessen the impact. The fact of the matter is, if you remember before that, it was actually a question about doing pre-certification, actually before the vote was certified, to do hand recount. That would have total chaos. So what we were kind of concerned about was that you had persons on the Republican side that would actually try to vote this down. So myself and a few others within leadership said, what we're going to do is we'll make sure this actually goes through. It's not good, but we understand that we're dealing with people who really don't care, that actually want chaos. And so their strategy to some extent could have been to cause chaos. And so we wanted to make sure that did not happen. This is not by any chance, any stretch of imagination of being like bipartisan. It was not. It was to make sure that those who actually permanently damage our elections would not be in a position actually to do that.
Governor Kemp asked the legislature to come back and consider redrawing Georgia's district maps in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's Calais decision. And then on day one of the special session, Republican leaders from the House and the Senate got up, delivered a press conference, and they said redistricting was not going to happen during this special session. What was your reaction when you heard that news?
Well, the key thing is that during the special session would not happen. So I think the key is it could come back up. My immediate reaction was, I hope it actually shows the voters that guess what? Your actions, you actually being relevant in conversations, you actually participating does matter, even beyond just voting. Because that's really what the Republicans are responding to. Because after the Calais decision came out, we saw that Democrats outvoted Republicans within the primary, the 2026 primary. One of the first times that's happened since like 2012, if not longer than that. That was part of that fuel. The Calais decision was part of that fuel. The other part of that fuel that kind of got Democrats really excited is the fact that we're giving them real options to actually choose from. But they saw that kind of energy and it scared them. And so therefore they actually are now pushing that off. And that's what that was about. But I think the key takeaway to that is that the voters understand that not only do we need you to vote, that's key, but also get engaged. That's also key. Get engaged in the process. And when you do that, you see that you can actually make change.
You can see extended interviews with both Senate leaders right now on 11 Alive. We are streaming on the 11 Alive app all throughout the day. You can download it for free to your TV or to your phone.
All right, it's summertime, but we still have so much to talk about. Politics just doesn't slow down in Georgia. So let's bring in our politics roundtable. We have Spiro Amburn, Senior Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting. He previously served as Chief of Staff for Republican Georgia House Speakers John Burns and David Ralston. Alicia Thomas-Searcy is an education leader and political analyst. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Center for Strong Public Schools. She's also a former state representative, and in 2022 was the Democratic Party nominee for state school superintendent. And from Georgia Public Broadcasting, politics reporter Sarah Callis. She is the Capitol correspondent for the GPB show Lawmakers. All returning panelists, welcome back to panel. I want to get into this special session and a question that we raised at the very top of the broadcast. Was this a waste of time, or did they actually get something done? And what do voters get out of this? Alicia, let's start with you.
I would say it was a waste of time for certain people, and it was absolutely a waste of money. They were required to go back to special session because they didn't, fix this QR code issue during session. They were not required to take up any of the other bills, including the maps or this attempt to increase sales tax. And so none of those things were successful. They didn't even deal with the QR code issue. They just kicked the can down the road. And so I think for Georgians, there were winners because we didn't have to deal with maps. We didn't have to worry about minimizing the voice of minority voters. That's what this map issue was about. And so also the winners were Georgians who showed up at the Capitol, who made their voices heard. I think their impact is the reason that Republicans said, no, we're going to wait on these maps. And so it doesn't mean that it's over. Right. Delay does not mean denied.
Yeah, we just heard Mr. Jones say that in his
Yes.
interview that this redistricting thing could come back up.
Never say never in Georgia politics, right? I mean, we're going to be watching closely. Spiro, I want to bring you in here on a bit of a rift in Republican politics that we saw come out again in that interview with State Senate Majority Leader Jason Abatarte. We've seen it play out for months now, and that is between Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and some Republican state lawmakers. Anna Vitarte criticized Secretary of State Raffensperger, kind of pointing the blame on him and his office for not implementing SB 189 and getting the QR code situation sorted before this deadline. The secretary responded. He sent a letter to lawmakers earlier this week, effectively saying that his office has been ready and willing to implement the changes to comply with SB 189, but the legislature failed to allocate the necessary funding for the mandate, saying it was the legislature's fault. Who's right here, Spiro?
You know, you're always going to have finger pointing. You know, it's politics. I mean, it is true that, the state Senate had an opportunity to pass a bill to deal with that issue during the regular session. That did not happen. Of course, then we get into the primaries and the political finger pointing. But, Governor Kemp felt the need to go ahead and call the special session to deal with that issue. And I think that was the right thing to do, because in order to be in compliance, there needed to be changes, and they needed to come up with some plan to deal with the November elections. However, that's the first time in recent memory that I can remember that a governor calling a special session with several items in the call, and the General Assembly did sort of flex its authority to, make the decision to not take up all of those issues.
And I think that can also speak a little bit to Governor Kemp's legacy a little bit. I want to bring you and Sarah to talk about the voter, because when we look at the special session, we're talking about potential redistricting that was now held off, QR codes. Are these issues that voters actually care about? Are these the priorities?
Well, we saw a big response from voters dealing with the redistricting. We saw people that were in support of it, and we saw a strong demonstration in opposition of it at the beginning of the session. And so I think this is definitely things that voters are watching as we're looking at the next election cycle. I think with the QR codes, that might be a little bit in the weeds for the average voters, but here in Georgia, we have a lot of people who really care about election security. Yeah. So we might see some interest from them.
And one follow-up from you, will people remember this in November? I mean, it's June.
People's memories can be pretty short, but I would expect Democratic candidates to campaign, especially on the redistricting, as we head into November.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a strong.
We've got about 60 seconds left. I want to get Spiro and Alicia, your thoughts on this. So 30 seconds to each of you here. Spiro, you opened this door talking about the legacy of Governor Brian Kemp, and also how much political power he has in this moment, seeing the legislature kind of flex and disregard his requests. Spiro, first to you and then to Alicia. How much political power does Brian Kemp have left in his last year in office?
Well, he's still the governor, and in Georgia, the governor has an inherent amount of, executive authority. So he will still have a lot of influence, even though his preferred candidate did not win in either the governor or the Senate race, in particularly the Senate race. I think you could argue that race got much closer. So I think he still has some authority that he will be willing to use in his last 6 months.
Alicia, 30 seconds to you.
I served with Governor Kemp and have a lot of respect for him. I think the more he follows what Donald Trump wants him to do, the more trouble he gets himself into. So I'm hoping these last few months he'll return to the authentic Brian Kemp that has bipartisan support and will, stem the trouble that he's had. And his legacy is important. And I think he's done a lot of good things, a lot of things I don't agree with. But I think, again, the more he follows Trump, the more trouble he and Republicans will get into.
All right, this conversation is going to continue. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. This week, Republican nominee for governor Rick Jackson made his first campaign appearance since winning the runoff election.
Jackson survived a testy runoff with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and now has the task of uniting the Republican Party ahead of the November general election. Jackson was in Doraville Friday meeting with voters at a restaurant on Buford Highway. Alongside him, Insurance Commissioner John King and Attorney General Chris Carr. Carr ran for governor against Jackson in the Republican primary, but did not advance to the runoff, and then he quickly threw his support behind Jackson. The nominee says there has been no conversations with Burt Jones since the runoff, but that could change.
He has not called me, and we haven't talked yet, but I'm sure we're going to be working side by side to win in November. The Democrats and Republicans, I'm going to look at what can I do to help them be successful from that standpoint. And nobody is going to care about the people that the Democrats represent. Nobody will care more about them than I will, the people that they serve. Whether they do anything about it, I'm going to do something about it, and I've been doing it for the last 20 years.
Well, the Democratic nominee for governor, that is Keisha Lance Bottoms, has challenged Jackson to 3 debates between now and Election Day. In a campaign press release, the former Atlanta mayor says that she plans to participate in 3 televised debates, and she challenged her Republican opponent to join her. Bottoms says that she plans to be at the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debate on October 12th, and she also wants to do 2 other debates. She says that these debates should take place across different regions of the state. Now, Jackson, in his Doraville stop on Friday, told reporters that he will debate Bottoms at any point in time. We're bringing our panel back in here, and let's start off with this governor's race and these potential debates. Alicia, I want to bring you in here because, as we know, during the Republican primary runoff, Jackson did not go head-to-head with Burt Jones, even though Burt Jones called for him to go head-to-head with him. Could we see Jackson and Lance Bottoms face off, and what could voters see on that stage potentially?
I seriously doubt that Rick Jackson is actually going to show up for debates. His one and only debate, he had a very poor performance. It turned into a commercial, and I don't think he knows what to do. And I think that he needs to show up, though, because voters need to hear from him. What I think is interesting is that in all of his commercials and the way that he's spent that over $100 million, he's introduced himself to Georgians as the person who wants to deport or have people departed. He talked about how he wanted to beat Stacey Abrams into the ground. Very violent, I think very challenging in many ways in terms of how he presented himself. And now he's sort of turned a new leaf, and now he's this great guy who wants to help all of Georgians. I think voters are going to remember exactly who he said he is, and Georgians are looking for a governor who's going to stand up for them, who does not want to redraw maps and reduce the voice of minorities in the state, and they want people that are going to work on health care and all the issues that matter.
All the different issues. It's really interesting that you bring that point up, too, because we are kind of seeing this shift in language from the campaigns. If we have time, we'll go into the Senate race, but Colin's campaigns are kind of shifting in that as well.
It's the tale as old as time in some ways, the primary messaging and then the general election messaging, and we're in that shifting period right now. Spiro,
Keisha's not going to change, I'm telling you that.
We're going to find out.
She is who she is.
Spiro, let's get a Republican's perspective on this. What do you make of this debate, I guess, and then also the general election versus primary campaign messaging?
Well, he says he's going to show up. I hope he does. I think he should. I think it's important for the voters to see the contrast in the different philosophies, whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. He ran an impressive primary campaign from the standpoint of spending an unprecedented amount of money and, very sophisticated, campaign. I think the concern for Republicans is looking at the turnout numbers in the primary, and, will he be able to use that same formula to overwhelm voters and get that turnout on his behalf and get independents and more moderate Republicans. That's what I'm interested in seeing.
Sarah, do you think if he refuses to debate, that would hurt him?
I think it really comes down to, is he trying to reach across the aisle, and maybe grab some typically Democratic voters or middle ground voters, or if he wants to focus on really energizing his base, because they're already receiving a message from him and they've already decided that he's the one that they're going to support. So maybe that wouldn't be as beneficial to them. But for those swing voters and those typically Democratic voters, that could be an opportunity for him to appeal to them.
He'll also have more time to prepare. Because even with that one debate that we saw with all the governor's candidates, he just got into the race in February. He's not a politician. Burt Jones has been doing this for a very long time.
We have about 60 seconds left. We're going to do lightning round now. We're going to go down the line here. 20 seconds to each of you. We're still a long ways away from the general election, but not that long because it's going to get here fast. Alicia, we'll start with you. What's going to be the defining issue of this campaign, do you think?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know, and you only have 20 seconds to answer it, too.
Of course, it's got to be affordability. You have to have a candidate who understands, first of all, what it means to have to make a decision about gas. Do I pay my, light bill, all of those things. And obviously, Keisha Lance Bottoms understands that as a working mom and all of that. So I think affordability will be the biggest thing. And sadly, Republicans just have not had an agenda that focuses on that. And they tried to raise taxes.
Spiro, your 20 seconds.
I will agree with affordability. I think this issue of property taxes versus income taxes and the issue of, local governments and how much local governments are spending and keeping that. Which side can do the best job at messaging their strategy on affordability?
Sarah, from your reporting, what do you see?
Once again, cost of living, affordability, and I think what we can see here is Democrats and Republicans agree that's a central issue. They just don't necessarily agree on how to fix it.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you
all
guys.
so
Thank
much.
you. We're going to be right back. Much more to come in just minutes.
Welcome back. Well, as Pride Month comes to a close, I sat down with Dr. Helmut Love, an openly gay Republican running for Georgia House District 57. Well, in a wide-ranging interview, we talked about his campaign, his political beliefs, and how he navigates the intersection of his personal and political identities. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had to downplay your sexuality to be accepted by Republicans?
That's interesting. It's very hard for me not to be liked, like who I am, right? And very honest and open. And in fact, I'm almost oddly attracted to the most aggressively awkward person in the room, okay? Because I see the hurt or I see the division. Now, I'm gonna be really real with you. There are groups in the Republican Party, just like I think in the Democratic Party, that aren't about embracing the other side. They just aren't, right? And I found myself, even in either room, I found myself, you can't play with us. We're not talking to you. You're not of us. And that's true for either side. I can't go into some rooms on the left and talk about, hey, I'm concerned about how the trans agenda is impacting children. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about some of the confusion that I'm hearing in teenage kids or preteen kids. This isn't how it was when I was, and this is concerning. So that conversation's very difficult to have in some rooms, just like on the Republican side, right? When I'm really talking about, listen, there's the mental health of some people is such, they can't work right now. They need help and support, and the system is hurting people, right? So I see it on both.
And you're talking about in regards to like the work requirements that are about to start?
I'm talking about things like just understanding that we can't leave all our mentally ill on the streets, right? Like that's not going to work for all of us. It's not working. So we've got to do some things differently, and I say it's in the middle.
He will face Democrat incumbent Stacey Evans on the November ballot, and this is just a portion of our nearly hour-long conversation. The full interview is streaming right now on 11alive.com. Dr. Love's run for state house, it comes after an unsuccessful run for Atlanta mayor. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Always a busy week in Georgia politics. Thank you for watching us today.
We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another exciting edition of the Georgia Vote. We'll see you then.